Before our service begins, if you have a mobile phone or mobile device, please do make sure that it's turned off so that it doesn't disturb our service. If it weren't for Abe, I wouldn't be here. In fact, if it weren't for Abe, none of us would be here. And that, of course, may seem like a ridiculous thing to say at Abe's funeral service. But what I mean is that we wouldn't be here at Temple Beth Shalom. Abe and Marion were instrumental in the founding of this community, helping set up a building that could potentially house 100 people, far more than they ever expected at services in Santa Fe. Over 50 years later, here we are, in the newer sanctuary that had to be built because there were so many families who were members of this community. Now, with over 300 families and nearly 100 religious school students, Temple Beth Shalom is larger than Abe and Marion could have ever believed at first. Having only been a member of this community for a year, I obviously did not get to know Abe as well as so many others here. And yet what became clear to me from the beginning was Abe was a real treasure. Rabbis come in all shapes and sizes. Some like a lot of silence in the service. Some don't mind having a member of the community stand up and tell a joke in the middle of announcements. Or just before we're going to say, Motzi, the prayer over bread. If Abe was in your community, you had to be the second kind of rabbi. In fact, I would be talking to other members of the community after the service, or I would be meeting visitors hoping to bring them into our community, and Abe would just walk straight over, and in that wonderful, bold voice, would just start telling a joke, despite the fact that another conversation was going on. I thought about this for a while, and I wondered why he did it. And I realized it was because Abe loved to see people smile. He was a giving man, a very generous philanthropist who helped organizations all around New Mexico. But he was giving in another, more important way, perhaps. Yes, some of his jokes were corny. Yes, sometimes I really didn't understand them at all. And sometimes they were really funny. But every time Abe stood up and came over and told a joke, he was giving a moment for a smile. I didn't know him when this temple was founded. I didn't know him as he supported the community while it grew. But I did know him as a man who always gave a smile. Abe remains with us, partly as we think back to his jokes, but also more profoundly with us in this community. The ark that houses the Torah scrolls behind me was dedicated by Abe and Marion in honor of their family. Every time we read from Torah, Abe is with us. And that's particularly the case when we read from the Holocaust scroll. When the Holocaust Torah Scroll Restoration Project began, the very first letter to be restored was written by Abe and Marion. It was an amazing moment in the life of this congregation and the life of a founding family. Abe said at that time that he did not sign the Declaration of Independence, but that this was just as meaningful to him. We hold that with us every time we read from that scroll. It is said that Torah is a tree of life to those who hold fast to it. Abe was a tree of life in this community, helping it grow, develop, and bring forth new fruit. We are all here because of Abe, and we are eternally thankful for everything that he did for us. In the presence of death, let us not fear. We share it with all who have ever lived and with all who will ever be. For it is only the dust which returns to the dust as it was. But the spirit returns to God who gave it, and in God's hand is the care of every soul. The world we inhabit is a corridor to the world beyond. We prepare ourselves in the corridor to enter God's presence, who is our employer and knows our sorrows and our labor. Faithful is God to give us the reward of our good deeds. God redeems us from destruction and leads us in the way of everlasting life. Psalm 23 is perhaps the most appropriate psalm at this point. It is a psalm that talks of walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and nonetheless fearing no harm, for God is beside us. Mizmor David, Adonai roi lo echsa, bino tesheya bitzeni, ame menuchot yanaleini, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni v'magle tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki helech begeitz hamavet, lo yirara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, shivtecha umishantecha, hema yanachamoni, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, taroch lefanai shulchan, neged zorarai, dishanta v'shemen roshi, dishanta v'shemen roshi, dishanta v'shemen roshi, kosir vaya, Achtov v'chesed, yidafuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai, liorech yamim. The Psalm of David. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. In green fields God lets me lie, leading me by quiet streams, restoring my soul, guiding me in paths of truth, for such is God's name. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are beside me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. You spread a table before me in front of my enemies. You soothe my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy seek me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Throughout our service this afternoon, we're going to have some reflections from members of the family, and our first reflections come from the grandchildren.
We'll do it by age.
For the past 2 years, there was one thing I could always count on. It's 8:25, time to call Granny and Papa. Granny and I fill each other in with the latest news, and once we decide there's nothing else world-shaking, we say, "I love you," and then I hear, "Abe, it's Allie." The first thing out of his mouth is always, "Well," filled with excitement and shock, like he had no idea I was gonna call. One time I told Papa that Max and I found some good tamales in Minnesota. He was just as shocked as I was, and for the next month, he found a way to incorporate St. Paul tamales into every conversation we had. I never had to check the weather to find out what to wear the next day. Papa was so beyond passionate about the ones that he loved that he tracked the weather in every sports team imaginable, no matter if it was in Minnesota, Boston, or Colorado. Who's going to tell me when the Minnesota Lynx make it to the playoff this year? My grandpa was all-knowing, no matter what the topic was. I knew exactly who to call when I couldn't open a champagne bottle or when the Gophers won the jug and I just wanted to know what that even meant. No matter what, our call always ended with Papa saying, "Well, we love this call, love you, and we're looking forward to hearing from you tomorrow." A quote that describes what Papa meant to me is, "To the world you might be only one person, but to one person you may be the world." Well, Papa, a world without my favorite human is something I never thought possible. But boy, was I lucky to have you by my side for 22 years. I'm so thrilled you got to see me graduate last week. Your grandchildren were your pride and joy. And let me tell you, we thought pretty highly of you too. Thank you for being the coolest dude I knew, the most supportive and perfect grandpa a girl could ask for, and thank you for making me laugh since '93. Papa, I love you, love you.
That's a tough grandchildren's speech to follow. Abe Silver, or Papa to the grandkids, could add lightness or an air of humor to any situation. It was seriously unwavering. One of the first memories I had of this was years and years ago when we came over to see him after he had something wrong with his eye, which I think involved some surgical procedure. Being young and very perturbed by the sight of his puffy red eyeball, I asked, "What's wrong with your eye?" And he shrugged and responded, "Granny hit me in the head with a baseball bat." He could insert a joke into every situation, even if it didn't quite fit properly. Once when we were driving my dad to the airport for his trip to Tanzania, Papa called to wish him safe travels and was on speakerphone in the car. After a few pleasantries, he quickly threw in a short, very dirty joke for the entire family to hear before passing the phone on to Granny, leaving us squirming and filled with uncomfortable giggles for the rest of the car ride. His jovial and commanding presence was undeniable in every scenario, so much so that is still present right now around our family, around this temple, and all over Santa Fe. Though his spirit can only be assessed in memories, and it is so hard to be reminded that he is gone, it has clearly touched the lives of so many, and it seems like it has become immortal. His love for his family and his community is also something so clear and so strong that it will live on long after him, and I am lucky to be a part of that love.
You'd practically have to live under a rock for the past 8 decades not to know that my grandfather loved to tell jokes. No encounter with Abe could be finished, or therefore started, without a smirk and a simple, "I've got a good one for you." Sure, sometimes the joke was bad. Maybe you'd heard it before, or the punchline would get a little convoluted. he always had a few jokes to sling out, whenever the time called for it, and let me tell you, the time called for it all the time. I once said, Abe, Papa should have taken to the web, put his jokes on Twitter for the world to see. Could you imagine? We might have dodged a bullet, but he may never have gotten a firm handle on the social media, but it's safe to say that the internet still is not ready for Abe Silver Jr. For Papa, jokes weren't something he used to impress people or gain followers. They were a way to make every conversation he had a little bit more personal, a little bit more brighter. My grandfather enjoyed spreading joy. This is easily apparent when you see or hear about his accomplishments and contributions to the Santa Fe Opera, Temple Beth Shalom. But I feel these feats pale in comparison to the simple, pleasant man who just loved to tell jokes. A man with so much happiness and compassion for others that he shared that with the rest of the world as much as he could. So on that note, I leave you with a classic Abe Silver. It's a pretty bad one.
It's a good joke.
So a rabbi took a job at a Duracell factory. His job is to stand on the production line, and as the batteries go by, he says, "I wish you a long life. I wish you a long life." It's a pretty
Psalm 121 invites us to lift up our eyes to the hills, and is often included in funeral services and memorial services in order to remind those in mourning that we will eventually lift up our eyes and our hearts out of mourning. I know of two tunes. One is the slower, more somber tune, but the family, quite rightly I believe, picked a more upbeat tune for Psalm 121. Esayenai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Esayenai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz. Ezri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz. Esahenai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Esahenai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri. Please rise. Hatzur tamim b'chol derachav, erech apayim umalei rachamim. Chamol na'al avot uvanim, ki lecha Adonai haslichot v'harachamim. Tzadik ata Adonai lahamit ulahachayot, asher biyadecha pikdon kol ruchot. Chalila lacha zichronenu limchot, v'yichuna inecha barachamim aleinu fekuchot. Ki adecha kol basar yavo'u, ufishehem ata techaprem. Ki im avonot tishmoya, Adonai mi ya'amod. As a father is tender to his children, so will you, O God, be tender to us. You guard us when we go out and when we come in. In the shadow of your wings you shelter us. Even darkness will not darken our spirit, for in your light we see light. God, bring us peace, and may your faithfulness give our spirit strength. Support us, God, when we are silent through grief. Comfort us when we are bent down with sorrow. Help us as we bear the weight of our loss. God, our rock and our redeemer, give us strength. God swallows up death forever, wipes away tears from every face, and takes the pain and sorrow from every heart. For salvation comes from God, whose power of redemption is vast. Adonai Natan v'Adonai lakach. Yehi Shem Adonai Mavarach. God has given, God has taken away. May God's name be blessed. Please be seated. I'd like to invite Ben to come and share a reading.
Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. From childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness and back again, from health to sickness, and back to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, from grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from the defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not in some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage.
I invite up Carolyn to come and share some words.
On the day that my dad died, the daily word that I get on my email was a quote from Maya Angelou. She said, "The main thing in one's own private world is to try to laugh as much as you cry." That has been true for me this week. I have indeed laughed as much as I've cried. We as a family, and I personally, have been blessed with the outpouring of so many phone calls, personal visits, and endless notes, emails, and texts. Dad was loved. So I thought, as a way of eulogizing Dad, I would share with you the top 10 ways that Abe will be remembered. 10, Abe will be remembered as a pillar of this community. Some said that if they did half of what Abe did in their lifetime to Santa Fe, that this would be a different place, not the city different. That New Orleans boy was loved by this city and loved this city. 9, Abe will be remembered as a friend. Well, I have to tell you, Dad had some friends for 80 years. And now they lost the one person who knew who was alive and who was dead. Truth be told, Dad had hundreds of friends. But he made a recent friend just 2 days before he died. It was one of his nurses. She even came to visit him after she was off duty and no longer working on that unit. 8, Abe will be remembered as a businessman. Dad and Mom ran the Guarantee until 1988. He was great with numbers, but he also knew how to treat customers. You can't believe the number of people who came up to me and said that Abe was the one that let them pay over time and helped them establish their first credit. 7, yes, Abe will be remembered as a Rotarian. A Rotarian? A Rotarian. Rotarian. And a trustee for New Mexico Tech. The word is that yesterday at the Rotary meeting, it was dedicated to Dad. They confirmed his 40 years of perfect attendance. One joke that he chose to tell at the Rotary Club was because a new member from Espanola had joined that particular club. And so he said that there's a common bumper sticker in Espanola that reads, "Honk if this is your car." It's hard to believe that Dad was a trustee for New Mexico Tech because he had absolutely no techno experience in his life. But what really touches me about his association with Tech was that 4 days before Dad died, a woman that Dad met at CVS Pharmacy walked across the stage at New Mexico Tech and received her diploma. Because of Dad's help and his affiliation with Tech, she was able to achieve her dream. 6, Abe will be remembered as a board member. I went to pick up a folder today to put my eulogy in, and in it was a typewritten list of all the boards and things that he was part of. I've only listed a few here, but he had 2 pages of single-space typed of things that he was on the board of. So I'm telling you, I'm really bored with that story. Abe will be remembered for his memory of people, places, and things. He had an uncanny ability to remember who was in the class of Newman from 80 years ago. He could tell you what team played in the 1964 playoffs. He could tell you which year Tiger Woods won his first Open. He could tell you the last time John Crosby laughed. Abe was remembered as Papa. He became Papa. He became Papa when he became a grandfather of Thomas, Johanna, and Allie. He loved, loved, loved his grandchildren. Tom is like Papa in that he doesn't know a stranger. Johanna has ink running through her veins and took on the ability to write as she is now for a magazine. And Allison got Papa's work ethic and love of caring for her fellow human beings. 3, Abe will be remembered as the father of 3 wonderful, magnificent, compassionate people. There's nothing more to say about that. 2nd, Abe will indeed be remembered for his sense of humor. It was a rare time that Abe didn't have a joke to share. He was always at the ready to say something to make you laugh. I have seen and heard it happen over and over in my lifetime when Dad would say, "Excuse me, Rabbi," during a temple service, or "Madam President" at a board meeting, followed by an Abeism joke or personal comment. Some of you, I know, were bemoaning the fact that these jokes would be lost forever. But I have to tell you, the strangest thing has happened. Mom, who couldn't remember a punchline to a joke to save her life, is now telling Dad's jokes right and left. She's channeling Abe. Number one, which leads me to the number one thing Abe will be remembered for. Marion, Mom, he didn't do all this alone. He did it with a strong partner. And perhaps one of the greatest lessons my father gave me was to model what it meant to be in true partnership. When I was growing up, Dad would leave for the store in the morning, and 10 minutes later, and I kid you not, the phone would ring and he'd want to speak to Mom. When I went to market with him in California, Dad put together the figures and Mom could buy the exact number of pieces for the store. They played on one another's strength. They believed in one another and trusted one another fully. They worked hard and played even harder. They were rarely honored individually. They were mostly honored as a team. Mom said many times this week that you had a great run, 64 years. And we could all hear Dad in the background saying, and one of them was marital bliss. Dad instilled many things in me, more than I know. But what I do know is he taught me the importance of helping and serving others. He instilled in me a strong sense of confidence. And yes, he gave me a wicked sense of humor. As Dad was signing the authorization to do the angioplasty a week ago, he said to the nurse, "This has been a heartwarming experience." Well, Dad, I hope you're feeling the heartwarming love of this community that is surrounding your family today. And Dad, if you could do one thing for me, please, please, please let me know which joke God liked the best about the rabbi, priest, and minister. I'd really appreciate it.
Please rise. Ata gibor le'elam Adonai, mechaye meitim ata rav lo hoshia, mechalkel chayim b'chesed, mechaye meitim barachamim rabim, somech noflim v'rofeh cholim, umatir asurim, mekayem emunato lishenei alfa. Mi chamocha ba'al gevurot, umi domelach. Melech memit umachaye umatzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman ata lahachayot meitim. You, O God, are the endless power that renews life beyond death. You are the greatness that saves. You care for the living with love. You renew life beyond death with unending mercy. You support the falling and heal the sick. You free prisoners and keep faith with those who sleep in the dust. Who can perform such mighty deeds? And who can compare with you, a sovereign who brings death and life and renews salvation? You are faithful, O God, to renew life beyond death. Please be seated.
How many 60-year-olds can say they're still Daddy's little girl? What a gift he gave me. Behind all Dad's jokes and laughter was a gentle giant that did everything with dignity and pride. Growing up with an icon had its ups and downs. The ups were the proud feelings I got when people would say, "Abe Silver is your father? What a wonderful guy. You're so lucky." The downs were growing up. We had to watch our P's and Q's because if we got caught, they would always know we were Dad, Abe Silver's kids. Growing up to this day, my friends would always like to go to my folks' house because they were so much fun and they loved my parents. After hearing all week from so many kind people throughout my life saying what an impact Dad had on all of them, I can't help but feel humbled. Dad had a knack for making people feel very important. A quote from one of my dear friends this week was, "Your dad was a treasure of immense measure in all of our hearts." I'm going to miss all his phone calls telling me, "Marg, tennis is on. Did you get the final score of that game?" He would also call to tell me tennis balls were on sale or they had a sale on this or that at Smith's. Dad always loved a bargain. He would drive all over town to save 2 cents. We will never know how much he spent on gas, though, to save his 2 cents. When I cooked and had extra, I would always share some stuff with my folks. A phone call would always be predicted about 8 p.m. that night, and Dad would say, "Marg, that was the best ever. I loved it." Dad was the best father anyone could ever ask for. He was always so supportive in everything we did in our life. Of all his many accomplishments in his life, his family meant more to him than anything. He loved all his children and took pride in all their accomplishments. He treated my husband Scott like a son and my sister-in-law Gloria like a daughter. His 3 grandchildren were the love of his life, but his main true love was my mom, and what a dynamic duo they were for 64 wonderful years. What a great role model I had. Dad, thanks for giving me such a wonderful life and setting such high standards and examples for me to live by. Daddy, I will love you forever. May your memory be a blessing.
Thank you.
You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing.
Our last eulogy today is from John.
Two rabbis and Shirley MacLaine walked into a bar. Thank you all for coming today to celebrate Abe. He would have loved to have had such a captive audience to mesmerize with his jokes. At first, I was having a lot of trouble trying to figure out how to write a eulogy about my dad. I was sad for my mom and my sisters and my family and my niece. And then I thought, snap out of it, man. I get to speak about a man who lived 89 remarkable years. He had an incredible wife who was his partner in everything he did. He had 3 marginal children. Gotta be honest, Carolyn. He had 3 fabulous grandchildren who he got to see grow to young adulthood. He conquered Santa Fe in a way that had only been done once, and that was back in 1692 by Don Diego de Vargas. Abe arrived in Santa Fe at the age of 28 years old, an outsider who was relegated to selling shoes for his father-in-law. He rose from those humble beginnings to run a successful business, help run banks and hospitals and operas and museums, and became chairman of the board or president of every organization he joined. The only other non-New Mexican to make that kind of impact on Santa Fe was Bill Richardson, and he ended up running for president. So how can we best honor Abe? I know he and my mom have received awards from just about every organization in town, but I think we can do better than that. I was sitting in my office on the plaza yesterday, and I came up with this great idea. Why don't we do a Santa Fe Mount Rushmore on the plaza? The family has this great building with a huge roof. We're not using it. We couldn't find a way to monetize it, so we're not using it right now. And I think this would be a perfect place for such a monument. The monument would consist of 4 people: Maria Martinez, Don Diego de Vargas, Archbishop Lamy, Abe Silver Jr. The monument will cover the 4 most influential influences in Santa Fe: the Native Americans, the Hispanic culture, the Catholic Church, and Jewish merchants on the plaza. What do you think? I think it's a great idea. I know we might have a little problem with historical styles, but Peter Worth is here, and he can take care of that pesky John Gambine problem. Thank you again for coming to celebrate my dad's life. 2 rabbis and Shirley MacLaine walked into a bar. He never told me the punchline. Love you, Dad. Thank you.
We start drawing our service to a close with some of the more formal prayers. I invite you to please rise.
From Psalm 16, I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Shiviti Adonai, lenegdi tamid, ki mimini balamot. Lachen samach libi, vayagel kvodi, af besari yishkon lavetach. Ki lo tazov nafshi lish'ol, lo titen chasidcha lirot shachat. Todieni orach chaim, orach chaim. Sova semachot et panecha, nimot bimincha netzach. Shiviti Adonai, lenegdi tamid, ki mimini balemot.
שוכם במרומים, המשא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזו הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת אברהם בן אברהם ומרים, שהלך לעולמו. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרו בצרו, החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר Amen. God, full of compassion, whose presence is over us, grant perfect rest beneath the shelter of your presence with the holy and pure and high, who shine as the lights of heaven, to Abe Silver, who has gone to his everlasting home. Source of mercy, cover him in the shelter of your wings forever, and bind his soul into the gathering of life. It is God who is his heritage. May his soul be at peace in its place of rest, and let us say, for those of you who have a siddur nearby, which is probably the first half, the closest half of this room, we invite you to turn to page 294. For the concluding prayer, the Mourner's Kaddish. Page 294, we say, Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabba Amen, Ba'alma divrachute v'amlich malchute, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'emu Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabba mavarach la'alam ulamei almaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitba'ah, v'yitchomam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitada, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei d'kudusha, berechu, le'ila min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, damiram ba'alma, v'imru, Amen. Yehi shalom rabba min shamaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, Amen. Say shalom b'momo, uya say shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'emu, Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all the world. And let us say, Amen. V'yadecha navkid rucho, v'im rucho geviyato, Adonai lo v'lo nira. Into your hand, O God, we commend his spirit, and with his spirit his body also. God is with him. We shall not fear. I invite you to please remain standing as the family will leave in their own time, and then please feel free to join the family afterwards at Quail Run.